Shalom and welcome back to the Rashi Nosh. I'm Pastor Matt.
And I'm Kara.
This week we are in a Torah portion called Chukat. And in our Rashi Torah discussion commentary on page 131, we have a section called Strong Suit. So let's read this, and as is our tradition, we'll go through some discussion questions. Many a parent whose child exhibits atypical behavior will bring the child for psychological assessment to determine what is wrong with the child. Such knowledge may be important, but by itself it usually provides limited insight, since it is also critical to know a person's strengths. An inherent point in this verse, in which the king of Edom responds to the Jews' request to pass through his land. But Edom answered him, "You shall not pass through us, else we will go out against you with the sword." This is in Numbers 20, verse 18. Rashi explains what prompts the king of Edom to refer specifically to the sword. "Else we go out against you with the sword." What Rashi says is, "You, the descendants of Jacob, pride yourselves on the voice you inherited from your forefather Jacob, saying, 'We cried to the Lord in Egypt, and he heard our plea.'" Literally, he heard our voice. "Well, I, the descendant of Jacob's brother Esau, will go out against you with my forefather's legacy, yet by your sword you shall live," from Numbers 20:18. This is what Rashi says. So Rashi explains that the Jews' reference to their voice in verse 16 recalled the blessing for effective prayer that Isaac conferred on his son Jacob. The voice is the voice of Jacob, as in Genesis 27:22. Hearing this reference to the Jews' legacy from their forefather Jacob prompted the king of Edom to refer to his legacy from his forefather Esau, that he would live by his sword. Both the Jews and the Edomites thus recognized their individual strengths, effective prayer from the former and the sword for the latter, and expressed their intention to employ strategies that drew on them. Similarly, when we look at children, better psychological assessments can provide a fuller picture both of their strengths and weaknesses. Drawing on a child's strengths then becomes just as important, if not more important, than working on any weaknesses. The same can be true of adults. Psychologist Martin Seligman, the pioneer of the emerging field of positive psychology, which focuses on achieving a fulfilled life rather than treating mental illness, calls for using your signature strengths every day to produce an authentic happiness and abundant gratification. Some adults have never asked themselves, "What is my signature strength?" outside of the context of preparing for a job interview, after which the answers are usually soon forgotten. Other adults may have asked themselves this question earlier in their lives, but it would elicit a very different response today. Even people who are well established in their personal and professional lives may benefit from understanding and acting on what they do well and what brings them fulfillment. I think this is very wise. And I think this is perceptive by the authors here to say that we probably only really examine our strengths and weaknesses when we are filling out a resume or writing a bio of ourselves. So what do you believe are your strengths, and in what ways does your job or other activity capitalize on them? So I'm going to mention a strength that I have, and then maybe a weakness that I have that you have as a strength, and then maybe you can speak to that.
Okay.
So I would say that I have a strength of having a vision for a ministry. That I think I have a gifting and a strength to seeing a big picture on a plan that can be fruitful in a certain ministry endeavor. I tend to be a visionary in that way. Now, a weakness of mine is I'm very good at laying out the vision. I'm not always the best at going about the details on how to bring about that vision. And that's usually where you come in. I don't have my gifts of administration and that kind of thing are not as strong as my gift of vision, coming up with the vision and casting that vision. Which is why I think it's important for people like me who are more visionary and more big picture to surround themselves with very talented people that are better at the nuts and bolts of how to do that vision I think if you don't, I think you're operating out of ego by saying I don't need anyone or
Mm.
I can do it all myself or whatever. I know where the boundary of my strength goes into a weakness. So that's one thing that I think I am strong in. But that leads into maybe something that you're strong in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know that I definitely am more of a detail person. I can look at something, either a task that needs to be done or a project that needs to be taken care of or an event or anything like that, and I can kind of I'm gifted in breaking down everything that needs to happen or be purchased or to be done, and then even like dividing that up into different days or people to take care of things. Or I am not good at the vision necessarily. I tend to have to see either it's like someone like you who's given me something to work on, or it's if I have a project, I have to go online and get a bunch of inspiration from other people. And I just like go, oh, I like what they did. Oh, and I like that. And let me figure out my version of kind of doing those. Like I have to have a springboard of already items for me to be able to do that, you know. Um, but it translates into like I don't get paid most of the time to do those types of items, like my job, so to speak. But I mean, obviously, I've been doing it my whole life in ministry with you, and at different events
Well, I
throughout.
think,
I mean, even my daughter's wedding, and just like big projects that we have to just tackle. But even just the stuff around the house, like little things, like just coming up with staying on top of everything. I am a list maker, and
but I think that's
I
what
like
your
to make
job
lists.
is at our church. Your job is your paid position is to help organize like the different people that are going to be in our children's ministry every
Yeah,
Sunday and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
coordinating them and getting them the checklist and getting them the curriculum for that
Mm-hmm.
day and all of that. I think you're very good at I think I would forget a certain detail and then we'd have a small crisis. And I think I would have a good idea of, hey, I think this is what we should do, but I may forget a step and how to get there. And then that's where things fall apart. So I think it's good to surround yourself with people that may have an opposite strength or a complementary strength
Mm-hmm.
to you, and even in marriage. I think it's a good thing.
And I think
Now, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I was gonna say, and I think if I have to, you named a strength and a weakness, so I was trying to think of a weakness since I feel like the lists and the details are my strength. I feel like maybe one of my weaknesses would be even in trying to accomplish some of that stuff. I tend to just just say I'm going to do it all myself just because sometimes it's easier, not having to, mix different people into a project or whatever, or to be, let go of control a little bit of how it's going to be done if someone else does it instead of me, that kind of thing. But sometimes sometimes you just don't know, get scared to ask people if they say no, that kind of thing. So I would think that's probably one of my bigger weaknesses is I tend to try to do things all on my own, and that's definitely sometimes yes, but sometimes it's not good. And you are good about asking for help and like saying,
I hope so. Yeah.
I need hands, and I would look to you go, we can just do that ourselves. And you're like, but why? We don't need to. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, so that brings us into the next question, which I think both of us can answer in the affirmative, and that is if you compare your strengths and the most important qualities needed for your job, is your job well suited for you? And I think for me, being a senior pastor and being a teacher, I think I think those strengths of vision of receiving that vision and then casting that vision not just as the leader of a congregation, but as the main teacher of a congregation. I think that's very helpful,
Hmm.
and so I think I am well suited
Yeah,
for
I
that.
think so
And
too.
we've often talked about how even if we weren't in professional ministry, even if this wasn't our job, that we would still just be doing ministry. It's just who we are. When you were managing an ice cream store, you were essentially doing young adult ministry with
My
these,
employees.
yeah, with
Yeah,
your employees, absolutely. And it's
yeah,
just it's just kind of who we are.
yeah.
So I would say for me, and I think you would say, with your job that your strengths are the most important qualities needed for your particular job as our director of Christian education for our church. I think it fits you well. Do you agree?
I think so.
Okay. I think it's good for us to be honest with ourselves first, and then honest with those around us, because I think sometimes others will notice things in our lives where we may have a strength in a certain area, or we think we have a strength in this area, but we're not quite as strong. I think sometimes we can be dishonest with ourselves and think, oh no, I can do this very well. But sometimes it takes an outside voice in a loving way to say, let's let you play to your strengths. And that is sort of over here. We have this kind of running joke in our ministry that you may think that God is calling you to work with children's ministry, but if you don't like kids, he's not calling you to children's ministry. Like if you're not built to do that, if you don't have the patience and the stamina and the energy to keep up with kids, is God really calling you into that ministry? I think sometimes we might have a desire, that seems like something enjoyable to do, but we're not built for it. And I think that's one of the wonderful things that we learn, those of us that go to college or university, in those first couple of years. Some of us, I did, change our major, change our focus of study in the first couple of years, because we realized once we get into it, I'm not really well suited for this. And so that, I think, is a wonderful way for you to examine yourself, to be honest, and to also accept the honesty of others in a humble way when they suggest, hey, I think you'd be better suited for this. And that's what we try to do with our ministry teams and our particular congregation, is to match people not only with their calling, but make sure their calling matches their giftedness and their talent and their desire.
And I think that just harkens all back to how the body, it's made of all these pieces, maybe the mouth or the whatever, it seems more prominent, but I mean, it can't function without all the other pieces, and sometimes, your strength might seem small, but it's very important in the grand scheme of things.
Absolutely.
What I mean? And so, yeah. That's
wonderful. So what are your strengths? What would you say is your signature strength? What is that for you? And it might be time for you to make a change. You may be in an area of ministry where you feel burned out. Maybe you are trying to force something to happen that isn't really your signature strength. And I know sometimes, especially if you're in a small congregation or a home group, sometimes you don't have the privilege, you don't have the option of, I'm not really built for this type of ministry. I'm built for this over here. Sometimes when there's only a few people in your group, some people have to do multiple things. But that's where I think we ask the Lord for his grace, and we ask for grace for the people around us to be patient. To be patient with us. And I also would encourage you, if you're doing everything yourself and you're not asking for that help, you don't get a special medal or ribbon from the Lord for doing everything yourself. That's not the way that it's supposed to be. And one of the things I love about Judaism is, even with students and teachers, that it's the goal of the teacher in Judaism for the student to surpass you, for them to do better than you, and to be a better teacher than you, that we need to make disciples that make disciples. And I think that's something so important that we need to remember. So this week with Parashat Chukat, think about what your strengths are, capitalize on those, think about what your weaknesses are, try to minimize those and address them, maybe even try to get better at certain things, and maybe learn the power of delegation, of giving someone else, even if they would do it differently than you, even if you think they wouldn't do as good a job as you, it's better for you to have help than for you to do everything on your own. And that's something that we have learned in ministry, and we can absolutely testify to the fact that it is so helpful and so beneficial just for your own spiritual and emotional and psychological well-being for you not to do everything. So be good at delegation. Find your strengths, capitalize on those, have someone else come alongside you in your weaknesses, and your ministry will be successful. Thank you so much for joining us this week. It's always a blessing to be with you. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. Like and comment on this video and share it on your social media. on your platforms so that it can go out to many, many people all over the world. Thank you. God bless you, and shalom.